Welcome to Learn It, a series of digital scrapbooking tutorials by Wendyzine Scraps. Today we are going to take a look at the brand new revamped Photobook toolkits for 2018. I went back through all my toolkits and just kind of updated them for best practices. And then in addition, I tried to consolidate all the different types of actions into one toolkit to make it a little simpler to choose between the different options. So we're going to go through today and look at each type of action. I'm not going to demonstrate every single action in every toolkit, but we're going to cover the basics, the basic resize action, the basic double page action, and there's a few other types, and we're going to try to look at each one so you get an idea of how they work. In each toolkit, there are different types of toolkits. So we have the generic Photobook toolkit. This adds just a standard amount of bleed to your layouts for printing at any printer. And then we have the Shutterfly toolkits, and the Shutterfly toolkits are specifically sized to give you pages for Shutterfly because, of course, Shutterfly sizes are not standard. Both of those toolkits are going to come with the same types of actions in them pretty much. The biggest difference is the generic toolkit is going to give you all the sizes in one kit because there's just one type of action there, whereas the Shutterfly toolkits are going to include all the actions for that size book. So let's start with the generic toolkit and one of the resize actions. So you'll see here that we have a 12 by 12, 10 by 10, 8 by 8 letter horizontal, vertical, 5 by 7 horizontal and vertical. So those are all your resize actions. Basically, you want to decide what size book you're going to be printing, and then that's the action that you want to run. So I'm going to go ahead for demonstration purposes and duplicate this layout, and we're going to call this generic 10 by 10 and click OK. All right, so there's our layout, and let me go ahead and just ungroup this. So now we have all our layers here. Now, the way this action works is it's going to resize to the safe size to get all of our elements in the safe area, and then it's going to ask us to select the background paper to enlarge it to fill the space. So the one thing I want to do before I get started, if I have a background layer that's locked like this, I just want to go ahead and select it and double click it. And then sometimes what I like to do is go ahead and pre-select these back two layers in case it's completely ready to go at the next step, which I'll show you what that means when we get there. Then I don't have to stop and select them later. Okay, so we're going to select the 10 by 10 option here. And just one more aside, this is the Photoshop Creative Cloud or Creative Suite edition. There's also a Photoshop Elements edition of each of these same toolkits that work just a little bit differently, and I will show you that when we get there. Okay, so we're going to select the 10 by 10 action and press play. And we are reminded here that if our background layer is flattened, we must double click it to release it, which we already did, and press continue. Okay, so this is just telling me that this font is not loaded. And that's okay because Photoshop can use the vector data without having the font loaded. So we're just going to say OK to all to get us past that warning. Of course, you can always go and load your fonts in before you do this if you want as well, then you won't get that error. So right now, Photoshop is just resizing our canvas for us and giving us some guide rules. So here's the step I was talking about. So we come to this pause step, and what it says is press stop, select all the layers that need to be enlarged to fill the background, and then press play again. Now, because I've selected these two layers, and those are the only two layers I need to fill the background, I could just press continue here. But let me demonstrate how you can select additional layers if you need to. So in this case, we would just press stop. Okay, and we would kind of zoom in and just look at the layers to see what needs to actually go to the edge of the canvas to look correctly. So like down here, maybe this paint should go all the way to the edge as well. So in that case, I can go ahead and select that. And maybe, let's see, maybe I want this paint to also be enlarged to go along with the paper since it is in position right here where I want it to be. So maybe I want to make those changes. And to select individual layers, hold in the Command or Control key, and you can add or subtract from your selection. And then when you're ready, come back to the Actions panel here, and the action is set up to start right where you left off. So don't click anything over here, just come down and hit the play button again. I'm just going to zoom out so we can kind of see what it's doing. So press play. And now the action is going to enlarge those layers. Now you'll see here, you get a message to examine your layout carefully to see that everything's in the right spot. If you have just a background paper that you're enlarging in this step and not little extra bits hanging off the edge, this will almost always pop exactly right in place. But because I had some extra things that made this not exactly square, we are just a little bit off. So all we're going to do is hit stop and Command T, and then we can just bump this over so that it fits right in place. And we might want to bump it down a smidge too. And then just press enter. Okay, so now the next thing we want to do, the safe area is the area within these inner guide rules. So we just want to take a peek and make sure that no photos that have important faces or things like that or journaling is going past this line. Anything past this line can be cut off or hidden in the fold of the book. So this layout looks great. And so now we can continue on. So we go back to the Actions panel and we press play to just pick up right where we left off. And we're going to flatten it. We're going to be prompted for some sharpening, which you can adjust the amount of here by dragging this up or down. And you'll see you can get way sharp or less sharp, and you can play with all these, but we've put just sort of a low standard amount of sharpness in there for you, and you can just press OK to accept that. Then you're going to be prompted to save your JPEG, so I'm going to go ahead and leave this at gen10x10.jpg. And I always like to choose optimized and a setting of 10 and press OK. And that's all there is. There's our file. We can go ahead and close out of it. So that's how the bleed actions work. Now, we also have in this generic set a saver only option. And the reason for this just is going to save your layered file in your JPEG. So if you get going and you're making some changes to the layout after it finishes, and then you want to save it, but you've clicked off of where you left off in the action, you can just come down here and use the saver only action. So it's just a handy little added benefit. I am going to go here to bring up a 24 by 12 page here, so I can show you the two double page options. So these are just the same layouts done on a 24 by 12 canvas. In some cases, you may have the same paper extending behind both sides, and that's fine too. In the double page options, there are two options. There's a lay flat option and just a regular bleed option. So the lay flat option assumes that the book is going to have no hidden binding right here because it's lay flat. So all it needs to do is add extra border around the outside. The general bleed actions assume that you are going to lose something in here to the binding of the book. And so what it's going to do is actually resize the left side smaller inside the safe area and resize the right side smaller within the safe area. So let's go ahead and demonstrate the lay flat one first because it's a little bit simpler. So I'm just going to duplicate this again just so that we leave the original up, and we'll call this double lay flat. And this might take a minute. Oh, that was pretty quick. Okay, so we have our layout here, and I am going to just choose the 24 by 12 add bleed action right here. Oh, we said we'd do the lay flat first, so that one is going to be right here. And let's press play. Oh, again, just make sure that background layer has been released, okay? So we're going to press play. This action is designed to add bleed. Open a layout and press play, and we're just going to hit continue. Okay, so now we're told to stop and select the background papers for both sides and be sure to get anything else that's falling off the page that we need to enlarge along with it. So I'm going to press stop, and let's go ahead and grab this paper and this paper. And again, if we wanted to, we could grab some of the other elements that need to extend to the edge if we wanted to. But in this case, really all we need is the papers. And so we'll go ahead and press play. And then we're prompted to save our TIFF here. I'm going to actually hit escape right here. I may go back into that action and add an extra stop here so that you can just pause and make sure that it looks okay, because that step is missing. So we'll add that back in so that you can look at your layout before you save it and decide if it needs any other adjustments. As long as it's okay, you can go ahead and press play again, and we'll get our layered file. We'll go ahead and prompted to do our sharpening, so click OK. This is for the JPEG, and then just press enter to save our JPEG. And again, I'm going to change that to 10 and baseline optimized. And the action's complete. We'll press continue, and it closes out for us and returns us to the original document. So that's the lay flat version. Let's go ahead and duplicate this again. Image duplicate, and we're going to call this one double bleed. Okay, and then here's the bleed version, and we're just going to press play. So press continue. We're going to say OK to all for that font error again. I'll just wait while Photoshop does its thing. The more complex your layout is, the longer it will take. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and do the same thing. We're going to select our background paper. So press stop. I'm going to grab that paper and press play. Okay, and here we have a reminder that in this particular type of book, we want to keep 1/2 inch of this gutter free. So we want to go and make sure that that looks good. So press stop, and we're going to zoom in. And we can see that in this 1/2 inch between these guidelines here, we can see that there's nothing super important. And that's exactly what we want. If we had a face showing up in here or some journaling, we would want to move that. And then the other thing you can do right here during this step is keep in mind that along this guide rule is generally where your fold of the book is going to be. And then this guide rule over here is on the outermost one is actually where the book is going to be trimmed. So in some cases, if you're looking for a centered kind of look here, then you may actually want to move some of your items over. So in this case, I'm going to grab everything for the left side page and hit Command T, okay, with the fonts. And I'm going to bump it all over just a bit. So basically what I'm going for is it to be about an equal amount of space here as it is here. And sometimes you might want just a little bit more on this side than that side. Your eye can adjust for some of that, but that just gets it a little bit more centered, and I'm a little bit happier with that. So I just pressed enter to make that happen there. And then on this side, I'm going to do the same thing. And this is only more obvious because it's sort of a grid pocket style page. If this were a more freeform page, it may not exactly matter where this falls as much. So I'm going to press Command T with all the right side page selected, and we're going to bump this over to the right a little bit. There we go. And once we're happy with that, we're confident that nothing is going to get cut off, we can go ahead and come back here and press play to continue. And we're going to flatten and sharpen and save. Okay. Now, the other benefit of this particular action is we're going to save a left and a right side for uploading individual pages to printers that won't accept a double page. Now, sometimes when that happens, the newer versions of Elements or Photoshop sometimes won't automatically select the left or right. They just default to the center. So the first time we run this, we're going to choose the left anchor, and the second time the right anchor, and then we'll be able to get exactly what we're looking for. So press continue. And this is what I mean right here. Here's your anchor, and I'm going to click the left anchor, which is going to give us the left half of the page. So click OK, and we're prompted to save. I'll put left, and then we're prompted to save the right. So I need to remember to select the right anchor this time, and press OK. Right. And we're complete. Press continue, and we can close out of that file. So that is how the double page actions work. So they're pretty straightforward, just like the other resize actions. Now let's take a quick peek here at the Photoshop Elements versions. In Photoshop Elements, because in some versions you're unable to stop the action and restart it again, the way we get around that is by having each section of the process as a separate action. So let's go ahead and we're going to go back to, let's close out of this one. Let's try to close out of as many things as we don't need as possible. And we already did this one, so let's close out of that one. Okay, let's go to just a regular layout. Okay, here's our regular layout again. And let's group those. Okay, so let's duplicate this image. Duplicate, and you don't always have to duplicate your layers. I'm just doing this so that I have the copies up again to show you more stuff. So we're going to call this one Travel 1 PSE. Okay, so in this case, let's go ahead and choose, we'll leave it on the 8x8, and you'll see we have part 1 and part 2, and then we have a saver action, so that's technically part 3. So we're going to run part 1 first. Oh, we didn't double click our background layer, so we have the opportunity to press stop and start over. So I'm going to double click that. And then let's just go ahead and pre-select these layers. Okay, so part 1, let's try again. Okay, so press continue. And those are instructions about what it's going to do, and OK for the fonts. Okay, so part 1 is complete. Press continue. And with elements, you should always press continue and not stop. In some versions, again, if you press stop, it will remove all your progress and send you back to the beginning. So always press continue. All right, so now we make sure we have those background layers selected, and we're going to run part 2. So just select part 2 and press play. And then press continue. And there we go. That layout looks great. And now all we have to do is run the saver. So we come up here and run the saver. Okay, so that's brilliant. So that's how all those work. Most of these have a part 1 and a part 2, and then the saver. In some cases, you might have a part 1, a part 2, and a part 3, where part 3 includes the saver along with something else. So that is the elements additions of these actions. Okay, so let's go ahead and make sure we can close out of that one. Okay, so that's the generic toolkit. Let's jump forward here, down here, and let's look at the Shutterfly Toolkit. So this is the 12x12 toolkit. So we have all of our actions related to 12x12, and that includes the 24x12 double page actions, the border actions, everything we need here in this set. So the 12x12 action, we've already pretty much demonstrated how that works. It just comes out a little bit different size than the generic. We also have the option of a border action where you can get a thin black border or a thick black border. Now the key with these border actions is that you have to have the texture loaded. You can replace it with any other texture, but for the action to run properly, you have to have the texture that came with your layout loaded into Photoshop. And you would do that through Edit, Presets, Preset Manager, and this works both the same way in both Elements and Photoshop. And then you want to come down to Patterns, and you just want to click Load, and then go find that pattern and add it in. In Elements, you want to choose Append to add it to the end of the list. So I'm going to click Load. So here in the download, this is the file we want, wzsfborderpat.pat. And just click Open. And that's going to add it to the very end, right there, black texture paper. Okay, so just click Done. Then the last thing that you need to do is to sort of tell Photoshop that you've installed that pattern. And the way you do that is just start a new document, Command or Control N, any size, it doesn't matter. And then we're going to go to Edit, Fill, and under Pattern, under here, under Contents, we're going to choose Pattern instead of foreground or background color. And we're going to turn that off. And here, we're going to scroll all the way down and choose the black texture paper. And then just click OK. And Photoshop fills that, and the beauty of that is now Photoshop is like, oh, I know where that pattern is because I just used it a few minutes ago. So we're going to close out of that. Okay, so the border actions are made to run on JPEG files where you've saved a JPEG but you don't have the original to go back and add a border. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this file, and we'll call this travel border. And then I'm going to flatten it. So if I had saved a JPEG, this is what it would look like. I would have my flattened file here and just one layer, and it would look like that. So you have two choices here, regular and thick. The thick border is my preferred one because it gives a little bit more bleed and leeway on the edge, especially if you're using a non-lay flat book. If you want a really thin border on a lay flat book, you could opt for this one here. So let's go with this one and press play. And press continue. We've already loaded our patterns, so we can press continue. And now we're told that we can press stop and change out the paper if we want to. So if I did press stop and I say, you know what, I really would rather have my border not be textured or just match a different color in the file. So I could like select this red and press Alt or Option Delete and fill it with red. I can change the color out. Or I could drag a different paper in behind. That's up to me. But the black one is really kind of a nice effect. You can also just go with white. If you want a white border, you can just do that. So once you're happy with it, just press play and we'll flatten and save it. Okay. And then I am going to come to my history, go all the way back to the flatten step here, and then let's demonstrate the thin version just so you can see the difference. It's really super fast, so no reason not to. Just continue, continue. And there we go. So there's the, let me turn the guides off. There's your thinner border. And of course it's going to trim to this. So you've got like a 1/4 inch border, and I think the other one's like a 1/2 inch border. All right, so that's the border action. Let's close out of that. What else do we have in this toolkit? We have the border swapper action. So this action will just take that paper that we just had in there, and it will let you choose another one to put in there. So you can do it with an action instead of doing it manually. And then we have the border saver action. So if you've gone and again, you've swapped it out, you've put in colors, you've played around, you don't know where to start over again, you can just use that to save out your file. Now these Shutterfly toolkits come with cover templates that allow you to set up your front back cover with a spine in position. And you have, let's stretch this out a little, you have a standard thickness and a thick book, because Shutterfly has two options, a book up to so many pages and then an extra thick book with more pages. So you want to open the correct template and then run this action to cut it. And these are going to work a lot like the double page cutter part. So what I'm going to do here is just open one of those templates. Okay, so this is one of the options in your download here. And we're not going to bother designing a page. Let's just pretend that this is our page, and we are just going to cut this up into its individual pieces. So after you've laid everything out and you're ready to go, just come select the action here and press play. And we're presented with the cropping box here. And remember, we need to select the correct anchor. So when you see the width being really small, this is 1.3437 inches, we know that's the spine. So for the spine, we want it anchored at the center. So press OK. And we'll save our JPEG. And then we want to save the left and the right. So we're going to go with the left anchor. And don't change these numbers here because those are already pre-populated for you. We'll call this left cover. And then we need the right side. And press continue. And there we go, we are done. Okay, so that's how the cover cutter actions work. All right, so rule it. Okay, so these are just simply for adding guides to a layout to see if you need to worry about bleed. And these are meant to work on either opening a brand new document or adding guides to an existing document. So let's close out of the cover. Here we have, let's just go ahead and use this one. So this was as if we had a flattened JPEG, and if we just want to test this to see if it's going to be good, we can add guide rules here. So press play. And this shows us how this layout would crop down without adding any bleed. So we can see here that this is where the trim line would be, right here, and go up. Now this layout doesn't look too bad because it looks like it has plenty of border around it. If this were a left side page, some of this might get hidden in the binding as well as these buttons. But there's nothing that's super important that would get cut off, so that's a quick and easy way to just check an already completed layout. And then if you want to start a new document from scratch and have it already be sized for Shutterfly, you can use the new action. And there you go. So you'll see this is a Shutterfly size, and you have your trim guides and safe guides already in there. So that's cool. This is a double page. It's the same way. This is your cut it action to cut a double page down. We already looked at those. You can add bleed and cut or just cut. And then, now these are interesting actions. I'm not going to demonstrate these, but you can take an A4 and have it placed on a 12 by 12 page for Shutterfly, or you can take a letter size page and have it placed on your 12 by 12. So if you want to have, like, say, a layout here and some journaling over here, you have a left and right option to do that. This Peekaboo option is meant to take a photo and place it in the hole for Shutterfly's Peekaboo book, and that's like a book with a hole in the front where the first page just has a photo right behind it. This will let you select your photo and position it where it needs to be. So that's what the Shutterfly toolkits look like. And again, the Elements version of that, you have part 1, part 2, part 3 for some of these actions, so just run them in order, part 1, part 2, part 3. Okay, so those are the basic resize actions there. We also have the 8.5 by 11 actions, and keep in mind with those, 8.5 by 11 being rectangle is not always going to resize proportionally. So you're going to end up with a little bit more trimmed off of one side or the other when you run these actions. So just pay attention to those borders as it goes through. And you have the same options in here. You have the border add, you have the resize, you have the borders, the swapper, the saver, and then you can add a square layout onto the wide page, just like the other ones. We took a layout and put it on a square page. You can do that. Cover cutters, rule it actions, and the double page actions. So all those are the same and they follow along the same exact way. Now we also have what I call the book sizer actions. So those are here. The book sizers are designed to take your JPEGs that have already been created for one size and quickly swap them into another. So if you already have bleed on your layouts and you originally had saved them 12 by 12, but now you want to go to a Shutterfly 8-inch size so that you can upload them faster, you can just run the Shutterfly 8-inch size. It's not going to add bleed, it's just going to make them into Shutterfly size. This is a great way to get your file sizes down for uploading. So that's what those are for. And then, oh, and here's the generic border actions. They're not actually in the folder with the generic toolkit, but I do have the generic border actions. So I think that covers most of the different kinds of actions in this set. If you have any questions about any of these actions, please don't hesitate to ask. I'm happy to help go over any questions you have or any problems that you run into. If you find any bugs in these, since this is a brand new set, we've tried to do a bunch of testing with a bunch of different people on a bunch of different systems. But if you find anything that's just acting really funny and you can't figure it out, please, please, please email me, because if you have a question about something, somebody else probably does too. Every once in a while, a bug can get through that needs to be fixed. And I would much rather fix it and get a new version out to everybody than have you guys struggle with something that isn't quite working right. So thank you so much for watching this episode of Learn It, and I will see you next time.